Today's talk is going to be on Tonglen. Today is Mother's Day, and mothers are considered very important in Buddhism, and contemplating how much they have done for us is a very good practice to help us open up our hearts. So Tonglen is a Mahayana practice that is used to nurture and develop our compassion and our loving kindness. We already have this. It's part of our Buddha nature. You might say it's an expression of our Buddha nature, but it sometimes can be very difficult for us to realize this and develop it in a positive way. So I am going to start here with a quote from Tralek Rinpoche that comes from his Lojong book. Only a nurturing person can nurture, and a nurturing person is nurtured by his or her own caring attitudes. If you can develop these qualities, you will no longer have to go around like a sponge, soaking up the drops of love others leave behind. So that's what we're going to work on this morning, is developing our qualities of loving kindness, nurturing ourselves, and then being able to share this nurturing with others. Love is defined in Buddhism as wanting all beings to be happy. And this is a very broad aspiration, and we have to start somewhere. And so we frequently have to start with ourselves, because we really have problems loving ourselves properly. We can do all kinds of things that we think are loving ourselves and nurturing ourselves, but actually they just cause us more suffering rather than happiness. And compassion is wanting all beings to be free of suffering, and of course the causes of suffering. And again, we have to start with ourselves. We can't want all beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering and not include ourselves. If we don't know how to have compassion for ourselves, we really don't know how to have it for other people. Now, one mistake that I see that people can make about compassion is that they see suffering in another being and it causes distress in their mind. And in this case, it's more like a trigger that brings up suffering that one has experienced in the past. And it's not really the distress that another being is experiencing that is the problem to them. It's the distress that they're experiencing. And what I have found is that people who work in animal shelters or shelters for battered women, even food banks and halfway houses, are frequently like this, that they have experienced a lot of trauma earlier in their lives, frequently growing up. So this is not wrong, but this is just a starting place. This is not the place to hang out. And so it's really good to understand yourself, to get to know yourself better, and to find out if we have triggers, or you could call them buttons. That's kind of an older term. and understand that we are the ones that installed those buttons, and that we are the ones that can learn how to uninstall those buttons. Traditionally, the Tonglen teachings that come from Tibet, that go way back centuries and centuries, they would have you start with your mother. But I have found that Westerners, sometimes this is a problem because they've had a problem of problems with their mother of one sort or another. And on top of that, our minds are so busy and so full of who knows what, that we really never learn how to nurture or love ourselves. We never really learned what love was all about. So I find that for Westerners, it's very important to start with ourselves. So the basics of Tonglen are that you would visualize in front of you the being that you want to use to help you develop loving kindness and compassion. And then when you are breathing in, you visualize that from that person, you are removing things that cause them to suffer. And you can be very specific about this. It could be a health problem, it could be disease, it could be a strong klesha, it could be fear, it could be lack of money, it could be feeling insecure. It just could be almost anything that is causing that person to suffer or has caused that person to suffer. And this takes the form of black smoke. And so when you are inhaling as you're breathing, you imagine that you are breathing in this problem that's causing suffering in that person in the form of black, thick, hot smoke. It could be imagined as, well, like the smoke that would come from burning tires. It's really kind of revolting. And it goes into your lungs and disappears. And when you exhale, then what you are exhaling is the antidote for whatever it is that's causing that person in front of you to suffer. And it could be the antidote is inner peace. It could be your health. It could be your wealth or other possessions. It could be almost anything, whatever it is that would be the antidote. And so that takes the form of white light that is coming from your mouth and nose as you are exhaling, and it goes to the person in front of you and soaks into them. And this is, you might say, delivered. Now we're breathing normally, so this exchange happens pretty quickly. Now I have a specific meditation here that I have written, and I'm going to read it to you first. And I call it Unlocking the Heart, because this is intended to unlock our own heart, to help nourish our own heart and develop our compassion and loving kindness. And again, the compassion is removing the suffering from the being in front of us. And the love is giving the antidote, what will make that person in front happy. So I will read this first, and then I will guide you through doing this actual practice. There is a Tibetan saying, quote, "If you have a warm place in your heart for yourself, you will be comfortable wherever you go," unquote. We can learn to nurture that warm place. Here is a simple exercise in growing that warm place. This is the key to unlocking our heart. The exercise is called taking and sending, Tonglen in Tibetan. It is a practice of sending love and removing suffering. It is best to sit cross-legged on a meditation cushion on the floor, as you would when meditating. It can also be done in a chair. Visualize yourself in the future, perhaps 10 minutes into the future, sitting in front facing you. When you breathe in, imagine you are inhaling black smoke coming from the visualized you in front. It carries with it your self-loathing, anger towards yourself, helplessness, powerlessness, any negative feelings your inner critic tells you. This is compassion, wanting to remove your future suffering. When you exhale, imagine breathing out white light, which goes into the you in front and soaks into you. Like the future you is sunbathing and soaking up the sunlight. That light carries with it contentment, satisfaction, cheerfulness, joy, delight, well-being, lightheartedness, and forgiveness, transferring it from the present you to the future you. This is love. Compassion for all, including yourself, is necessary for spiritual growth. The smoke you inhale can contain any thoughts that you are holding on to that cause you to suffer. You may become aware of other things causing you to suffer as you practice this exercise over time. Make a list if you like. Include the items on the list in this black smoke coming from the visualized you in front. The smoke goes into your lungs, dissolves, and disappears. The negativity and suffering does not accumulate in you. Concentrate on a few specific things in one session. The in-breath is short as you are breathing normally. When exhaling, we are preparing that warm place in our heart. Love is wanting people to be happy. And again, remember you are a person too, worthy of love without earning it. Sometimes it can be difficult to know and experience love free of negative emotions. Fondness, tenderness, warmth, and non-sexual intimacy are associated with love in this practice. The light you are exhaling can carry anything that makes you truly happy. When inhaling, you remove the things that cause you to suffer. Now think of the antidote and give it to this future you. The intimacy is that you allow yourself to look into the places where fear and loathing lurk. Then you can apply the remedy, love, to those places. In that warm place, you treat yourself like a loving mother treats her infant. Whatever the child does, the mother responds with tenderness, warmth, fondness, and gentleness. Now you can have that love you may never have had as a child or even an adult. You don't need to seek it in others. Just look inside to experience love. This is intended to be done regularly for 5 to 10 minutes. As you practice more, it is fine to extend the time if you like. During any one session, you can concentrate on a few things to inhale and a few other things to exhale. Use whatever is most needed at the time. One day it might be anger and forgiveness, another fear and fearlessness. This way the lock slowly opens. You begin to discover the advice your inner critic gives is inaccurate and does not need to be followed. Open the door and venture out into an open, spacious world. Take that warm spot in your heart with you wherever you go. Now you can be more compassionate and loving with whomever you encounter in daily life. Compassion and love are healthy and easily passed on. So with this, I would like to do a little bit of meditation now. So here we go. So imagine yourself sitting in front of you, facing you. This is the person you would like to become. So it's a person that will be 10 minutes in the future. And so just imagine whatever it is that happens to be bothering you right now, that your inner critic has been kind of, shall we say, discussing with you. Whatever it is that is going on, whether it be fear, anger, insecurity, poor health, financial worries, or whatever, breathe that in the form of black smoke. It comes from your pores, can come from your mouth, any part of your body. You're just sucking it out, breathing it in. Since this is visualization, it does not, you might say, dwell in your lungs. Your lungs aren't a vacuum cleaner bag. And then when you exhale, exhale the remedy. So now let's begin the exchange. Well, you have now become the person you wanted to be because 10 minutes are up. It's important to understand the difference between loving yourself and self-indulgence. And again, loving yourself is wanting yourself to be truly happy. And it also involves having the wisdom to know what truly leads to happiness and what leads to suffering, even if it produces temporary happiness. And of course, it starts with reducing the influences of the 5 poisons: passion, aggression, indifference, jealousy, and pride. The less those influence us, the more our wisdom surfaces and we can make wise choices in life. I've been going over some book classes the past few months, and 2 books we've been studying. One is Karma by Tonglen Rinpoche. The other is The Places That Scare You by Pema Chodron. And both of them have basically been saying the problem with us ordinary beings is that we're looking for happiness and love in all the wrong places. So our inner wisdom will lead us naturally to be more loving to ourselves and those that are close to us, and eventually others and all beings. So here I have categories here about how to, or qualities of unconditional love. And this is both for yourself and other people too. And then faults that block it. The first quality is spacious, feeling that there is lots of room to go in different directions. And a fault that blocks it is claustrophobic feeling, a feeling of no other possibilities or only a few possibilities, no room to move. And an example that I like to give is, so you are in a phone booth and you have closed the door and there is a wasp buzzing around in the phone booth. Some people you might say, freak out at that, afraid of being stung and so forth. Probably most people would be somewhat uncomfortable. And that is this claustrophobic feeling when problems arise or new situations arise. The spacious would be you're out walking in a park, in a garden, and you see a wasp flying. And there, it's no problem. It belongs there. The second quality is being flexible. This is very close to being spacious. Seeing many, many different possibilities, not only having quickly coming up with a plan B, but seeing that even if that doesn't work, there are plenty of other places to go to work with whatever is arising. The opposite would be rigid, having lots of rules, lots of shoulds. And the next one quality is empathy for yourself. And the problem that blocks this empathy is really it's too scary to look at what's going on. I'm too afraid to look at this, kind of a cold approach to yourself, and then just keep getting busy with external activities. Or other ways of covering it up. The fourth quality of love is being kind. Just being kind, as opposed to being mean. And we can be mean on ourselves in many, many different ways. We can be angry at ourselves. For instance, we can have guilt towards ourselves, which is anger towards ourselves. And this goes into the next one, which is forgiving, that we see our faults, we see where we have gone wrong and harmed ourselves and harmed other people, and so on and so forth. And then we forgive ourselves and work with it, as opposed to forget it or deny it, and then have this inner critic that's always angry at ourselves for being such a bad person. The next quality is supportive, that we're encouraging ourselves, nourishing ourselves to improve, as opposed to the constant criticism of that inner critic. We're protective of ourselves. Protective not in a hard way, but protective in terms of we avoid behavior that would harm ourselves. We would avoid risky behavior. We have that warm, soft spot in our heart for ourselves because we care about ourselves. We want to nourish ourselves. The eighth one is to acknowledge your Buddha nature, that our ultimate essence is Buddha. Our ultimate essence is primordial wisdom. And what blocks it is thinking that we're really not lovable. We're not worthy until we prove our worthiness or somebody else loves us. The ninth one is be a loving mother to yourself, rather than being a stern supervisor. The 10th is contentment. And again, this is inner contentment. It doesn't mean that you stagnate and you don't want to improve, but that you can be content with what you're doing right now in the present moment. And what blocks it is our 5 poisons of desire, anger, jealousy, pride, greed, ignorance. And finally, spontaneity, as contrasted with impulsive. Impulses come from habitual patterns. And spontaneity comes from having a fresh outlook, seeing at the situation as being new. So it's good to contemplate these things and look within. So now the next Tonglen we're going to start with other people. And again, traditionally, you would then put your mother in front of you. And here in the West, this can be difficult for some people because of difficulties that we've had with our mother. But I'm going to start with a guided meditation here, or just talking about what mothers have done for us in a traditional way. That our mothers have done so much for us. They carried us inside of them for 9 months, which would have been uncomfortable, I can only imagine. And then giving birth is painful. And then after that, they had to take care of that young baby who could not take care of itself. They had to feed that baby. They had to keep it relatively safe, and so on and so forth. And it was really at the cost of the mother putting the child's benefit before her own. And the mother then continued to train the child one way or another. And since we all have reached adulthood, we were taken care of well enough so that we could eventually be on our own. And so mothers have done this. Myself, I had a very difficult, traumatic childhood with a mentally ill mother, but I have come to realize that I have received tremendous benefit from her, partially from doing Tonglen, but I was unable to start with mom as an object of trying to develop compassion, and I started with my grandmother. And it's fine to use another person to begin this contemplation of developing compassion and love for others. And if you can't even think of another person, then think of a pet that you have had either now or in the past that meant a lot to you. The important thing is to use another being to help you develop more compassion and loving kindness for other beings. So here is a quote from the Karmapa that I really like. The primary resources we are offering are inner resources, our love, protection, care. They are received as comfort, security, and easing of suffering. This is how others can serve as a mirror in which we see our own beauty. So with that, let's now do some Tonglen with a being that you visualize in front of yourself. And I'm not going to do any guided here. You just use your own imagination. This person can even be a person that has died. My parents, my mother died, would have been 6 years ago. And that's fine if the person has died. And if it's a person that is alive, that is fine too. So now let's, one final thing that I would like to say, and that is that some people worry about if the person is sick, if they are inhaling that person's illness, if they're going to get sick. And the situation is this, that if you were a bodhisattva, you might be able to take on that illness from the other person. And a bodhisattva would willingly do that and knowingly do that. But since none of you are bodhisattvas, then you don't have to worry about that. You can't do it. So don't worry about that. And the same thing would go if the person is suffering in poverty and you're giving them your wealth. You can't do it unless you are physically motivated later to write the check and send it to them. So on that note, let's do some Tonglen. When you're doing this practice by yourself, I highly recommend doing shamatha meditation, just following the breath before you start to help settle the mind down. Maybe 5-10 minutes. 10 would be better than 5. And then maybe 10 minutes of shamatha meditation or the Tonglen meditation. And this can agitate our minds. And then follow it again with another 5 to 10 minutes of shamatha meditation or sitting meditation. That way, it helps our mind settle back down. The important thing is when you're doing this practice is have a feeling or a sense that this exchange is actually happening. Don't be too concerned if your visualization is not as good as you would like it to be. That doesn't make the practice less effective. And of course, it would be good to continue during a particular 10-minute session to then expand outward to other beings, maybe friends, and then people that you really don't even know. You could pick out somebody that you saw in the store. Or if you're not shopping in the store, you're self-isolating, somebody that you saw on television, maybe the news or something that was suffering. And then eventually what you want to do is put a person in front that you have some anger towards. And it's good to put that person that you have anger towards as being a person that you have a small amount of anger towards, and then take on what their suffering is and give them your happiness. So that's how this works. Ideally, I would do this in a program that would have a morning session and an afternoon session and lots of time, and we would go through all these progressions. But there's not time for this now.